Good evening, class. It's Sean Shetler, and tonight I'll be going over a review of chapter 7 through 9 of Leander Keck's Why Christ Matters for CHRI 6360 for Dr. Brian Gamble. We'll be covering the three different chapters: Christology, Soterology, and the Praise of God in Romans, chapter 7, Jesus in Romans, chapter 8, and the New Testament in Nicaea, chapter 9. Let's begin with chapter 7 and Paul's vision of unity and praise in Romans 15. In chapter 7, Leander Keck offers a theological and literary analysis of Romans 15, 1 through 13, presenting it as a climax of Paul's call for unity in the church. This passage draws together key themes: Christology, the person and work of Christ; soterology, salvation; and doxology, praise of God, as Paul appeals for mutual acceptance among believers. Specifically, Keck highlights Paul's effort to reconcile tensions between the strong, primarily Gentile Christians, and the weak, mostly Jewish Christians, within the Roman congregation. In this chapter, Keck examines Romans 15, 1 through 3 thoroughly as the theological and ethical climax of Paul's letter. He highlights how Paul intertwines Christology, Christ's person and mission, and soterology, salvation, to promote unity between Jewish and Gentile believers. Keck emphasizes the passage's parallel structure and repeated themes: Christ's example, scriptures, authority, hope, and the praise of God, arguing that repetition reinforces Paul's message. Romans 15:7 stands as a core exhortation, calling believers to mutual acceptance, just as Christ accepted them. Keck concludes that Paul's vision of a united praising church is deeply theological, not simply ethical, rooted in God's redemptive plan revealed through Scripture and fulfilled in Jesus Christ. Chapter 8 of Why Christ Matters by Leander Keck, Jesus in Romans, represents a nuanced theological and historical exploration of how Paul in Romans understands and presents Jesus. Far from limiting the discussion to the historical Jesus, Keck argues that Paul's Jesus is a richly layered figure rooted in Jewish tradition, shaped by early Christian proclamation, and central to the gospel soterology. Though close readings of key passages, Keck reveals Paul's three-stage Christology and the deep integration of Christology with salvation and God's covenantal promises. The chapter emphasizes Paul's reliance on Jesus' traditions and grapples with the tension between Jewish rejection and Gentile inclusion. Keck closes by underscoring the need to balance historical and theological approaches to fully grasp the Jesus of Romans and his continuing implications for the Christian faith. In chapter 9, Keck addresses how the New Testament portrayal of Jesus laid the foundation for later conciliar Christology, especially articulated at Nicaea 325 and Chalcedon 451 AD. He contrasts the scriptural affirmations of Jesus' identity with the later dogmatic formulations that emerged in response to the Arian controversy. Keck's central claim is that the New Testament does not contain a systematic Christology, yet it exhibits recurring theological motifs that shaped early Christian understanding of Christ's identity. Keck organizes this analysis around the tension between Christologies from below, Jesus as the historical figure and chosen agent of God, and from above, Jesus as a pre-existent Logos and divine Son. He argues that both perspectives are necessary, though the Arian heresy leaned heavily on from below reading, whereas Athanasius and Nicene orthodoxy defended a from above understanding. Central to the chapter is the role of early Christological hymns in texts such as Philippians 2, Colossians 1, and John 1, which Keck sees as the early theological witness that bridged the New Testament proclamation and consular confession. Keck explores how early Christological hymns function as a foundational building block for Christian doctrine. These poetic liturgical texts were not later theological inventions, but pre-creedal affirmations already embedded in the worship and faith of the early church. Chart 2 outlines 4 key hymns and their theological emphases: Philippians 2, 6 through 11, Colossians 1, 15 through 20, John 1 through 14, and 1 Corinthians 8, 6. Keck argues that Paul likely quoted rather than composed these hymns, suggesting they were already circulating in Christian communities. Their presence demonstrates that a high Christology viewing Jesus as divine and central to salvation arose early and organically within the life and worship of the church. These hymns were no later doctrinal additions, but communal expressions of faith that shaped and reflected early Christian theology.